We've really been working very hard to make sure that they're getting the proper funding for the in-state students. They're also increasing the number of in-state students. Every April and May, I hear so many complaints about students not being able to get into UC and how difficult it is now versus when I was applying, and it was, if you had a certain set of grades, it's relatively easy to get into not just one UC, but a whole bunch of UCs. So it's really less about affordability right now and more about access.
Right.
I feel like people feel like they can figure out a way to pay for it. Most people, there are obviously some who we have to continue to make sure they get their Cal grants, they're getting the full support. But right now it's about making sure there's enough room for people.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we're glad to be joined by Budget Chair Phil Ting. Phil, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know, here we are kind of in the crunch time of the legislature, final 3 weeks. This year's budget was kind of a work in progress. Are you guys still working on it as we're talking here right now?
We have a few things to finalize before the end of the year, so we'll be doing some technical cleanup, but it's pretty much been done.
Yeah.
I think the one thing we're watching is to see what the tax returns look like in October and November, because that'll make a major bearing on whether we have to reopen the budget or whether we're just going to be working on next year's budget.
Okay, wow. And like, you've been like watching over budgets. Not that you've been chair for 10 years, but you've been kind of working on budgets for 10 years. Kind of what has the ebb and flow been like kind of in your experience in this last decade, kind of putting these budgets together?
Well, I think it's really gone from, when I first started as budget chair, we were coming out of recession. We were coming out of doing a lot of devastating cuts on social services programs, trying to figure out how do we put money back into our social safety net, how do we put money back into higher education, and just really as we got more and more money, trying to figure out which priorities, because so many priorities got cut, which priorities really came first. And education really was our top priority. So K through 12, higher education, early education, that really became a major impetus for a lot of the, focus on those programs.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard your kind of origin story, Phil. Kind of what brought you to Sacramento and kind of what were you doing before you were an assemblyman, before you were budget chair? It seemed like you were born budget chair, but I know you weren't.
Well, I was the assessor recorder in San Francisco. And then before that, I was running Asian American Legal Civil Rights Organization. And to me, what brought me to Sacramento was really the idea that we could shape the state. We could really have a huge impact on 40 million people. And we had a lot of problems. When I ran, ironically, the biggest issue was around jobs because we were in a recession, hoping that the economy was going to come back. The economy came roaring back, and then all of a sudden housing, homelessness became major issues. And so it's really looking at all the areas that the state impacts, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's the environment, and trying to make major change. I always talk to my budget staff and I say, if we can't make a difference in the lives of 40 million people, then we're not really doing enough.
Right. It's interesting. So your district is part of San Francisco, right? But it's not, I guess the downtown part. It's the kind of the back area, the neighborhoods, right? Mm-hmm. And down the stretch, kind of.
It's the western part. It's like I always say, this is where a lot of folks live. It's the western part of San Francisco, and I have northern San Mateo County.
And it's kind of like the San Francisco has become like this kind of the darling of the media to say what's right or what's wrong with the world, and kind of like it's kind of a tale of two cities, right? People say where you represent is a different story from kind of the market area. Is that right?
Well, downtown's having struggles because our whole downtown area is built for people to work. Mm-hmm. And so we have infrastructure, we have bus infrastructure, subway infrastructure for people to come in and out of downtown San Francisco. And when people don't come in and out of downtown San Francisco, one, it's empty. Two, there are a number of businesses, whether you're a restaurant, whether you're a pharmacy, whether you're a convenience store, whether you're dry cleaner, shoe shine person, that really rely on those people being at work, going to work, buying breakfast, lunch, dinner, and that's not happening. So what you see is the downtown area being pretty hollow. What's interesting is the neighborhoods are very vibrant. You see a lot of life in the neighborhoods because people are spending time at home. They're working at home, so then they're eating lunch at home, or they're going to the neighborhood restaurant for lunch now. And so you see a shift from San Francisco, where there was always such a shift to downtown. Everything led downtown. Now there's a lot more activity happening in the neighborhoods. Now, I think long term, what you have is you have a lot of leases where people, companies leased out too much space based on what their headcount in the office is now. And when those expire, hopefully you'll see companies renting smaller, less space, and then other companies filling that with workers. And the whole point, hopefully, would be to get workers back in downtown San Francisco.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember talking to one of the guys who ran the ferry system and the bridge, and he was telling me about the volume over the Golden Gate Bridge and how much of a shortfall there was, and just less traffic. And it's just amazing, the millions of people and dollars that are just less per day.
Well, and you see, for the ferries, for BART, for Muni, it's a lot less traffic, but the bridge is crowded because what happens is a lot of people are driving now. So instead of taking public transit, when they are coming in for a day, a week, or two a week, they're driving it instead. And so that's really creates a lot of congestion. It's moving the region in the wrong way. So we need people to get back into transit, get to work, but we also need more people back to work.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I remember talking to you 10 years ago, and you were very high on education. You had young daughters at the time, and it was kind of a priority for yours. It still is. Can you kind of talk to us about kind of early childhood education, kind of what you're working on, and kind of how it's changed over the past 10 years since you've been here?
Right. I mean, when I started, my youngest daughter was in preschool, daycare, and so
That's
look,
crazy.
it's definitely crazy. She's now in 8th grade, right? So it's at that point, really making investments in early education, whether it's childcare, preschool, transitional kindergarten. At that point, I was very focused on, are we going to provide preschool to everybody or transitional kindergarten to everyone? It didn't make sense to me that 25% of students in California got transitional kindergarten. So 25% of the students got an extra year of school, and the 75% didn't. So at some point, we needed to either move that 25% into preschool or everyone into transitional kindergarten. We did that move into transitional kindergarten, a couple of years ago, and we're moving that way. Because of that, we're making sure that we do proper investments in childcare. So we focused on getting a temporary rate increase this year. We've added more childcare slots for families who can't afford childcare. And really coming out of the pandemic, we know that people won't go back to work if they don't have access to childcare. So that's absolutely so important, because if they have to make a decision between watching your children or going to work, they're always going to choose watching your children because that's their first responsibility. So again, such a critical piece of the economy, and they had a really difficult time during COVID. So now that we've come out of there, it's really trying to make sure we're making the proper investments in the system to keep it up and running, because most of the system is private providers.
Right. It's interesting kind of how COVID kind of changed everything and made us realize, like, hey, we can do some stuff at home, and some stuff has to be in person. And it's pretty clear that school for young kids has to be in person. Yeah. On the flip side, higher education affordability is crazy. And, I was super jealous of all those law students who got to do a Zoom law school, didn't have to go in and get the pressure. Seems like, there are some gateways that maybe technology can help us with higher education. Kind of what are you looking at to help with higher education and affordability concerns there?
Well, one, Governor Brown was a big fan of trying to do more remote learning, online learning. We started pushing that and experimenting with it early on, 2018, 2017, 2016, had no idea where it would go, that all of a sudden everybody would be remote for a while. And now that everyone's gone remote and people are coming back, it's been difficult to get some institutions back. If you look at UC's back in person. CSU is pretty much back in person. It's been really hard getting the community colleges back in person. And those are some of the most vulnerable students. So again, communities, college students, they probably don't want to go back because they're trying to figure out how to juggle their work life and their academic life. But because of the way they learn, and some of them are most at-risk students, they probably are the ones who should be back in person. So again, we're trying to find a balance between when to give students and professors the flexibility between teaching online versus when they should really be back in person. I'm teaching a class at UC Berkeley this fall in a few weeks when session's over. It'll be in person. I'm gonna make sure it's in person.
What are you teaching?
I'm teaching a California politics class at Berkeley.
Nice.
So that's going to be a lot of fun, but it's going to be in person, and I make sure that that's understood, and that's a requirement for people to, because part of it is being in class, participating in class is very, very important. Going back to your question around affordability, we've done a very good job of affordability over the last number of years, because during the Great Recession, fees went up significantly. Ever since then, fees have not gone up. We've been able to pretty much hold those fees in check. The biggest issue has been with fees in check. How do we admit enough California students? So because we froze the fees, then all of a sudden UC, CSU, they're saying, hey, we need money, so we got to go to out-of-state students to go get that money because it's frozen here for in-state students. Right. And so we've really been working very hard to make sure that they're getting the proper funding for the in-state students. They're also increasing the number of in-state students. Every April and May, I hear so many complaints about students not being able to get into UC and how difficult it is now versus when I was applying, and it was, if you had a certain set of grades, it's relatively easy to get into not just one UC, but a whole bunch of UCs. And so it's really less about affordability right now and more about access. Right. I feel like people feel like they can figure out a way to pay for it. Most people, there are obviously some who we have to continue to make sure they get their Cal grants, they're getting the full support. But right now it's about making sure there's enough room for people.
Yeah, what is it? How many more applicants or how many more students are they accepting now than, when you went there? What's the difference?
It's a huge difference, right? So, and I could have the percentages a little bit off, right? But when I was applying in the late 80s to go to UC, my understanding roughly, if you were like an in-state student, you had about a two-thirds chance or over a 60% chance to get into UCLA. UCLA's acceptance rate right now is like 8%.
Right, it's crazy.
Most applicants in the entire country. Right. Most applicants in the entire country, right? So how do you make sure there's enough room, not just for out-of-state students, but really for in-state students? Because before that, really there's a lot of folks, they pay taxes. They in their mind, they don't really have significant benefit in getting their kids into UC or CSU is really one of those benefits. And so you want to make sure that, hey, the students that are qualified really get every opportunity to attend the UC that they'd like to attend.
Yeah, it's crazy. You hear these angry parents talk about, their kid has a 4.0 and this and that, and all they got into was UC Merced, and you're like, how's that possible? That's crazy.
It's a lot. It's a lot of competition right now. A lot of highly qualified students, and also it speaks to UC. Really, we don't have a lot of private colleges here in California, and so most families, they really focus on the best public colleges for their children. And so when they can't get into that quote unquote best public college, they get very disappointed, which is understandable, right? So I think we have to push those colleges to keep expanding, and they really haven't kept pace with the population of California. Yeah.
We've had, Bill Wong on a couple times kind of talk about Ronin Project, and kind of, especially during the, COVID, there was a lot of AAPI hate out there, Asian American, Pacific Islander. Kind of, what are some of the things you're seeing now the past couple of years when some of these initiatives are you seeing the hate levels go down, and kind of, what can be done to kind of eliminate it?
Well, what's been great is really the community response. We saw when hate spiked, you had a president in the White House blaming anybody who looked like me, blaming people who look like me, that there was COVID, and that the country and the world was getting shut down because of Chinese Americans, Asian Americans, and so you saw a reaction. You had a president who really unleashed hate in this country, gave people license to hate, and what happened? People got beat up, people got murdered, people got attacked, people got verbally harassed. And to me, I was really proud of the community reaction. We had sort of a number of community organizations really step up, and some groups that formed overnight to very much stop and fight this issue. And I really feel like that's the only way to stop hate. It's about education. It's about working together as a community, because it's not just about hate against AAPIs. We had the biggest spike in hate, but the overall gross number, the largest number was still African Americans. And again, that hasn't been getting the attention it deserves. So it's really about making sure that we're working with other communities, whether it's African American community, the Jewish community, LGBT community, when you see very much folks preying on our communities. And I think I was really proud to lead our response at the state level, a really historic investment, about $166.5 billion here in the state. I mean, just to give you a contrast, the federal government, I think, gave around 10 million and New York gave around 10 million, really not the kind of investment that I would have hoped to have seen. But that historic investment has really led to more and more community groups being able to be active in the community, do education, do outreach. Also, so many folks who experience hate, they don't tell anybody. They don't this is just, we get reports on websites, but we know the large majority of it, nobody says anything. Someone says something to you in the street, someone maybe spits at you or something. If it's not something you have to go to the police for, maybe you don't report it, right? And so you see a community reaction really building strength, which is great, and building infrastructure, because now people have a place to go. I know in San Francisco, I have a lot of seniors who are AAPI who are worried about going to the grocery store, worried about getting on the bus. Before, the best thing about San Francisco as a senior is you're very independent. You can walk, you can take the bus, you can go to the grocery store on your own. Now you have too many seniors who are afraid. So we actually have a great nonprofit, Self-Help for the Elderly. They do a senior escort service. So if you're a senior, you want to go to the grocery store, you want to go out to eat, you're worried about going somewhere, they can call, get an escort to be on the bus with them, walk with them, go with them, just so they feel a little bit safer.
That's great. The legal system is full of inequalities. It's something, that's talked about a lot over there. And, when you're convicted of a crime, you're in front of a jury.
Yep.
And we've done a lot of kind of diversity of initiatives of boards and different things. But one thing that's never been touched upon is juries. And, if you look at a lot of case laws or a lot of things in history, kind of juries not being diverse or one thing or another, has created, problems and wrongful convictions. Kind of what are some of the things you're working on in that scope in terms of juries and diversity qualifications?
Well, a couple of years ago, I passed a bill to give San Francisco the ability to start their Be the Jury pilot program. And they had some private philanthropy. The private philanthropy was going to pay people to serve on juries. They're going to raise the stipend from $20 a day to $100 a day if they had a financial hardship. And what they found is, after about 2 years of doing this pilot, they found, the majority of participants said they wouldn't have participated in juries if it wasn't for the additional $80 a day, because they just frankly, they couldn't afford it.
Right.
They can claim financial hardship, and then with the financial hardship, they don't have to serve. Yet we're promised a jury of our peers, and if you're in court, quite often you have folks who come from middle income, lower income backgrounds, but that's not who serves on juries.
Right.
The people in their communities are not the people who serve on juries. It's completely the opposite. Usually they're wealthier, more educated. Again, we are all told we are able to have a jury of our peers, and quite often the peers just financially weren't able to serve in the jury. So that's why this year I have a bill, AB 881, to expand that pilot outside of San Francisco to Alameda, Los Angeles, a number of other counties, to really work to get the money to those communities, but also to expand and diversify our jury system, because quite often making sure that you have people from your communities to judge what you've done is absolutely critical.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point, because what is it, like $10 a day you get?
It's $20 a day, right?
$20.
So for people like you and me, for me, I can get paid vacation when I'm serving in a jury, so it's easy for me. I don't have any difference whether I'm in a jury or whether I'm at work. But for many people who, if they don't show up to work, they don't get paid. If they have their own business, they don't get paid.
Right.
They have to make that decision, and that's not really fair. They shouldn't have to make a choice between feeding their families or serving on a jury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it works both ways.
Absolutely.
Those people don't get to serve, and then two, you're not getting the fairest jury.
Right. You get people with different backgrounds, different biases. So I think it's very important.
Yeah. So housing has always been, I guess past 5 years has been top topic. And San Francisco is always a place people wanted to live, people want to build. And housing is tough. It's expensive. Kind of what are you working on the housing space this year?
So we have a bill around the Housing Accountability Act, a bill I carried last year. We couldn't get through this year, so we brought it back this year, AB 1633. And what it does is really tries to streamline the housing process. We had a lot, empty lot. It was used for valet parking for the Nordstroms a block away that recently just shut down. But it was an empty lot. The builder was able to get the permit. The planning department okayed it, and then it got stopped by our board of supervisors. And what was fascinating is that, again, they claimed there's a CEQA issues. For me, you want to make sure that if any local government is using CEQA or environmental review as a reason to stop a building, that there really are environmental issues. And so what the bill does is it really strengthens the Housing Accountability Act, which was really put into law to make sure that it provides a check against local governments who are abusing environmental laws to stop housing from being built. It creates certainty around a certain amount of timelines, about how much time they have to get back to the complaint. And also they have to articulate, hey, what are the environmental issues that you have to go fix? So that we have that. And then if they don't provide that information, the builder has the ability to go sue the city, provides a legal remedy for that builder. So really, it's a get out of purgatory card for that builder, which we hope will, again, help local governments not abuse their power, which is what the Housing Accountability Act was written for decades ago. It also really gives developers the ability to have some legal recourse should they sort of get stuck in this purgatory.
Yeah, no, because these projects can stall for a long time.
Yeah, right. The project finally got approved. The governor intervened, but now the market's turned. So the developer's like, well, it's too late. I can't build it. If I started building 2-3 years ago, great. But right now, I can't get the money. It's not financially feasible.
8% interest.
It's just going to stay. It's just going to stay empty.
Oh, that's crazy. This is a good lesson of you don't always have to get a bill signed by the governor to make change. So yesterday I was in CVS and I was, getting a prescription and checking out, and it asked me if I wanted my receipt. No receipt. You want to email, you want it printed, choices. I think we all remember a couple years ago, you introduced this bill to kind of restrict receipt waste. And you had one of your staffers, dressed in that really long receipt. Kind of what's the status of, paper receipts? And now we're in the digital age.
Well, we brought the bill back this year. We got a couple years back, we got a mention from Jimmy Kimmel. And, I think it brought a lot of attention to really paper waste. And not just that, but the receipts are all toxic. People think that, hey, these receipts can be recycled or they can be composted because of the ink and the kind of paper that's used. You can't recycle it. You can't compost it. It's total waste. So right now we brought back AB 1347, which is our skip the slip bill. We want to make sure that you have an option for paper receipts or no receipts. Make sure that that's an option. And then the other option is making sure that they take out the BPA, BPS chemical out of those receipts and the receipt ink. We've gotten a really positive response on the toxic part of the receipt, which is great. We're still fighting with many of the retailers and fighting with many of the companies who still are hesitant to give people that option. To me, it's a very simple option. You go to the gas station, you pump gas.
What are the arguments against?
Well, because
we need paper receipts.
Well, they talk about security. They say right now, it's, with crime going up, you need the paper receipt to make sure the person actually purchased it. I argue back that I almost never walk out of a store that checks my receipt. The only place that really does that is Costco.
Right.
So we actually worked an amendment out with Costco to make sure they can still do that. But outside of Costco, I don't have anybody checking my receipt as I'm walking out the door. They also argue that, again, this is something that's going to be very costly to them because they have to upgrade their technology and change their systems. What we saw during COVID is because small businesses were really much more adroit, they were able to adapt to new systems. You have better, newer technology for the small businesses. And so small businesses really overnight have complied. And for us, we took an amendment coming out of privacy committee to say this is really about companies that make more than 25 million. So small businesses won't apply to this. It's really 25 million, which is pretty much large businesses that have to apply. But again, there's really no good argument as to why they should not give us the option. And then this is about consumer choice. If I want a paper receipt, I can ask for it. But if I don't want it, I shouldn't have to take it. Quite often when I'm in the store buying some cookies or buying a pack of gum or a candy bar or something, I don't need a receipt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why are you forcing me to take this receipt? They print it out, they throw it away, throw it in the trash. It's kind of like a waste all the way around.
Yeah.
And so again, I think we're just trying to make the system much more efficient and also much more consumer friendly. It's about consumer choices. So if the consumer wants the receipt, they can get one. If they don't want a receipt, they don't have to have one.
Yeah. Interesting. So we're coming up, end of session, Suspense week. Kind of how you looking coming into Suspense here?
Well, I think it's going to be very exciting. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
It's always exciting.
It's always exciting, right? So Suspense week, the Suspense is coming on tomorrow. We'll see how everyone does. It's always very happy time when you get your bills out, and of course you're always grieving the bills that don't quite make it, and so you're trying to figure out what happens to those.
How much of an idea do you have which ones are going to get out or which ones don't?
You really don't have any idea.
Isn't that amazing?
I mean, you have a little bit.
Phil Ting, 10-year veteran.
You really. I think you get a slight sense, but there's. I think you're always surprised. Like last year, I was definitely surprised in both the probe committees, what got out and what didn't get out. You have some inclination. Like last year, I had a hate, we were talking about hate crimes.
Right.
I had a hate crimes bill, seemed pretty simple. Make sure that not hate crimes are underreported in California because not every law enforcement agency has a hate crimes policy. So we asked the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission to develop hate crimes policies and then share them with every law enforcement agency. So if they didn't have them, they could either develop their own or they could use the ones from Post. That got killed in the probes. Something that seemed so benign, Post seemed okay with it. Hate crimes is a major issue right now. This seems like the right way to do it. Again, working with law enforcement, making sure law enforcement has the tools to track hate crimes. It seemed kind of like a no-brainer. We're shocked that got held in a probe, especially, no opposition, no issue, no real fiscal issue.
How do you handle that? How do you handle the rejection?
Well, you just, it's like anything. You can't take it personally. Yeah. We're doing that bill again. It's in suspense. We'll see if we can get out this year.
That's the thing.
We're back.
You keep plodding along, kind of. I guess in your 10 years, you have a good track record, a good experience of, fail, but try.
Absolutely.
Succeed.
Yeah. I always tell, especially, my colleagues who are coming in, it's like you stay focused, you work on issues. And again, perseverance, right? You can't, there's some bills I'm surprised got out, like, oh, wow, that got out. That's great. Right. And so again, you're always going to have surprises both ways, pleasant surprises and surprises
that cut out, but I didn't get out. What?
Yeah. Or things that are unhappy. So again, you always want to just stay focused on the long game. You got time to focus and to really work on those issues. And government is created so that it's incremental change. We don't have an authoritarian government. So we don't have somebody who just says, today, everybody will do this. We purposely don't set it up that way, right? And so we have a lot of checks and balances. It's hard to create laws. And it should be hard to create laws because laws are something that everyone has to follow.
Right.
So if we're making 40 million people follow something, then it better be thoughtful. It better have been vetted. It better be something that we feel like will make people's lives better. And so again, I think it's okay to take time. I think it's okay to take time. The major challenge is when you have a crisis like homelessness, like housing that we're really starting to face. Our system moves probably slower than we should for that kind of a major crisis.
Yeah.
During COVID, you declare a state of emergency. We can do things immediately, but something like housing, homelessness, much harder.
Yeah. You're saying we need a state of emergency for that?
There have been declared state of emergencies and still not.
Yeah.
We're still in the same boat.
Yeah. Tough problems to solve. Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining us. I know you got to go shove off and get back to work over there, but appreciate the time and love the wisdom you shared with us, and best of luck on Suspense.
Great. Thanks for having me. It's been great to be here this morning and really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Phil.
Take care.